Good evening. This is Marhawkman of the Foundry Roundtable. Tonight I am going to be doing a demo on how to make branching storylines that are, well, not just something that the player can have the story play out more than one way, but where the player cannot go back and make the other choice while playing the mission. Anyways, here we have on the screen right here is the Twitch channel and Twitter for the Foundry Roundtable, and some Facebook groups put together by Foundry authors to help, with discussing Foundry missions and such like things. Anyways, so getting on to this. Like I said, this video is going to be very specific because we want to make a choice that the player has to make. So the only way to force a player to make a choice is through a story dialogue, which, when you write story dialogues, you can write it so that they can just simply squiggle through all of the multiple branching things and go through every single bit of dialogue, or you can branch it so that when they choose a button, they cannot go back and even read what the other ones were because they made the other choice. So for example, with this one, let's view this in the advanced dialogue editor. As you can see here, there are 4 possible paths, each of which results in a success. Thing is, once you get to the success status for a story dialogue, the dialogue disappears because that story objective has been completed and now the mission has moved on to the next objective. Therefore, the player cannot go back and read this. So any information you need to convey is something that you have to either put in the next quest objective or as optional dialogue in a different dialogue. But for this purpose, it's very useful because since the player is only able to make this choice once, the choice is irrevocable, and when you tie things in the mission construction to it, once the player has made the choice, the mission can be fundamentally changed in ways that the player may not even realize are happening because, again, it's a dialogue choice, and what you tie into it doesn't necessarily have to be related to it. Anyways, now, what you can't do is you can't actually change what the mission objectives are. I mean, in this one, the mission objectives are pretty simple because, again, this is just a demonstration of the concept. It's not a full mission based on that uses the concept. So for this one, you talk to this Borg person who is one of, what's that guy's name again? Anyway, that guy, one of his assistants, oh yeah, Akira Sulu. Anyways, so one of Akira Sulu's assistants gives you the mission to go to Betran, to this planet, where you talk to this Borg person about what you need to scan on the planet. Then, you talk to her, she gives you the dialogue asking you what you want to look at. Then your choice there changes how the map is put together. Thing is, this is just an example. You could make the question anything you want, and the effects on the map and the story dialogues whatever you want. So, for example, if you wanted to make a Romulan Republic or Federation-centric mission, you could put a dialogue in the beginning of the map where the NPC you're talking to asks if you're from the Federation of the Romulan Republic, not necessarily directly, but something where the player has to respond in a way that indicates whether they are Federation or Romulan Republic. Then, have that as a trigger to change all of the later dialogues so that they fit with either Federation or Romulan Republic players, and you don't see the dialogue options for the other side. Again, it's an option, not something you have to do. And it's a bit fiddly, because if you screw it up, you might end up breaking a dialogue because a player reaches a quest dialogue, they have to click an option to proceed, and suddenly there are no buttons because you hit them all because you accidentally hit them based on the wrong trigger. Again, test it, make sure it works, etc., etc. Standard Foundry stuff. Anyway, how does this actually work, though? All right. Well, first you have to build maps, because the current way the Foundry is constructed, you have to have at least one custom map, because other it doesn't qualify for anything, really. Next, you have to... Also, the reason we have to start with the maps is because objectives take place on maps, and you can't really finish the objectives without tying them to something on a map. I mean, you can put an objective in the story list, but you can't finish writing it out. So anyways, start with the maps, put in the objectives, and then you have to put in dialogue to describe the objectives. Because, let's face it, if blank objective boxes don't tell you anything, and it's not a fun story. Anyways, the real trick to this one, though, is all of the trigger work. Because here, see, it just said, none of these buttons here for this specific dialogue has a trigger, because this is the one that is used to create triggers for everything else. Here we have another dialogue where it has two options for everything. What are the triggers for these? Well, this one here is the default one, which automatically pops up if you don't have anything interesting happen. Oh wait, I didn't actually set triggers for these. Okay, you could. Let's go to this one. Anyway, here we have one where this dialogue option does not pop up until you have completed a quest objective, because, again, you're here to complete the quest objectives. Another example, though, is that, as I said before, is that you want to fundamentally change the basic nature of the story. So for this one, each of the four dialogue choices adds something to the map, and in some cases removes something from the map. So for one of them, there's a rock formation that you have to scan. If you do the default version, it is this one. It's just some high purity mineral that's useful for industrial machinery. Kind of boring, but hey, yay, we found something. However, if you chose the option that focuses on minerals, you find out that it's some weird special composite material that's kind of dangerous, actually. And the reason why the people here died. This, however, is done by trigger work, because here uses a dialog prompt reached trigger. This dialog prompt reached trigger is triggered based on the dialog you showed earlier, where it has 4 different options for what you want to focus on. As I said before, this choice is irrevocable, and you can only make one of the 4 choices. Now, that means that when you get to this prompt, by interacting with the invisible object, the game will show you one or the other of these 2 dialogues. The button actually looks the same, because you don't really... You could write it the other way, or you could write it this way. It doesn't matter. Your choice. But here we go, though, that the one where you chose that dialogue for the minerals is set to dialog prompt reached. Anything else has it as hidden if you choose that dialog prompt, because it's displayed immediately and switches from visible to hidden if you chose that dialog. Kind of important, otherwise you'd have 2 buttons if you chose that dialog rather than just 1. Alright, now to demonstrate how it actually works in practice. Like I said earlier, this one, as a demonstration, I set it so that it changes what type of mineral formation there is. as you don't need to actually change the props if your main focus is changing the way the story plays out. But for this demonstration, I decided to change the prop from a green crystal to a pink crystal because I can. And it makes a really vivid way to demonstrate how the objective has actually changed. See, here you see these big green crystals in the background. Now we talk to the lady. It's like, hey, let's look at the minerals. See? Pink crystals. Now, when we go over here and scan the pink crystals, it gives us the dialogue about how the pink crystals are something weird and dangerous. See? They kind of like explode or something. Reset map. This is may actually trigger a bug. Sometimes this doesn't reset the status of the dialogues. Although since I'm using the mineral prompt on both of them, you know, actually I'm not using the mineral prompt, I'm using the flora prompt. The flora prompt, I set it to have this create a volume effect of Borg spores floating in the air, which, yeah. Anyway, also it adds a bunch more trees over there that have Borg stuff attached to them. If you go over there, it talks about how the trees are part of Borg terraforming from the third Borg dynasty and stuff. Now, it didn't glitch out this time. Good. Here's a scan of the minerals. See, unusually pure, blah blah blah. Nothing particularly interesting or dangerous. This, though, is a basic example of how this sort of thing works. See, because that story prompt that popped up, since it's a quest objective, I can't actually make the objective tied to the crystals because I changed the color of the crystals by swapping the assets the crystals are attached to. And a quest objective for scanning an object, it always has to be the same object. You can't swap the object out. But, as I demonstrate here, you can change the text that pops up when you swap the objectives over, which can be very useful. Story writing, you have to set up all Foundry missions with the story written in pieces, and this is no exception. But for this, you need to not only write it in pieces, but you need to set the pieces so that you think about all of the possible ways the story can flow following that piece. Which, sometimes your lead-up text needs to be vague because, like, hey, we're scanning a rock. But you don't actually say what kind of rock, you just mention that you're scanning a rock. And also you need to make sure that you always have a way to complete the dialogue puzzles, because if you program it into the Foundry wrong, you might actually make the dialogue puzzles uncompletable instead of branching and twisting. At any rate, hope this has been useful for anyone who wants to learn how to do branching stories in the Foundry. If you want to, learn more, you can come to one of these nice groups and talk to us. We love helping other people learn about the Foundry. At any rate, I will see you guys at the round table.